Tallboys and Trackmasters is brought to you by Expert Exhaust. Expect more for your money. MTB Shock Dock, your choice for suspension needs. High Gear Success. From helping racers get sponsored to motorsports event operation and promotion, shift your passion into high gear. Miracle Works Detailing. No cars too dirty. And by Cycle Mart, your motorcycle parts store. So I need to switch up to some light here.
It really is the tale of all the time. Whatever gets you to look for
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome again to another episode of Tallboys
and Trackmasters.
Man, that just quenches the thirst, doesn't it?
Never gets old.
Well, we thank you all for tuning in with us again this evening. We hope you survived the eclipse. Did you survive the eclipse?
Yeah. I was leaving Morgantown and saw a parking lot absolutely full of people trying to watch the eclipse, and I got to see a big dark cloud roll right in front of the sun as they were checking that out. So
I utilized my my self-provided eclipse glasses, which was my welding hood. I got to check it out and look at it there. It was kind of creepy, getting dark and a little bit cold here in town.
Yeah,
it was different.
It was odd. It was a lot better than the one in 2017.
Yeah,
but still kind of overhyped.
It's like a snakes and sparklers type of fireworks event.
Yeah, really.
Well, we appreciate you all tuning in again. Episode 52. This is Tubesday. Tubesday, brother.
Happy Tubesday.
Happy Tubesday.
Because we can't do a Moose Day.
So we hope you guys get some insight about what we're going to go over this evening, and that is different ways to make sure your tires inflated and rolling down the trail. So, obviously there's a lot of options out there these days compared to how it used to be, where, frankly, it was just a stock tube and, have your luck with it. I know we were talking a little bit before, it seems weird how all these different options and just the entire threshold of having, a tire not go flat is very rider specific, isn't it?
Yes.
You have guys out there that just seem to constantly get flat tires, or guys that, they got a tube that's in there like 10, 15 years old and you don't have any problems with it anymore. I know it was kind of funny. We were saying that I would hate to see us put Arthur and Marcus Yonker together for a ride to see how many flats they get.
We wouldn't cover much ground that day, but spent a lot of time spooning tires back onto rims.
Yeah, but obviously, first option is going to be just a regular tube, or what I think a lot of us use these days is a heavy duty tube. So
yeah, it's actually getting difficult to get thin tubes anymore. Most manufacturers are making only like 3 millimeter
Yeah.
plus.
So like a standard heavy duty tube is what, like 4 millimeters
Yeah,
these
three
days?
to 3 to 4.
All right. Let's I got some pictures here to go along with what we're doing. So this first one here, this is an IRC regular tube and a heavy duty tube, and you can see the heavy duty is actually twice the thickness there. Like we were saying before, I think the regular tube is like 2 millimeters. So
Yeah.
um, my wonderful co-host here has taken upon himself to give us lots of research and data points.
I got the data.
He can help us guide us through all the stuff that we'll talk about here with this the traditional tube. So we'll go through a list of advantages and disadvantages for every one of these options. So I'll let you kick it off here, Trevor. What are some of the advantages of a heavy duty tube?
Well, they've been around forever. That was probably the first method of putting air into a bicycle tire. So then that got grandfathered into motorcycle tires, etc.
Yeah.
Most affordable option.
Yeah.
Um, you buy Tusk tubes, which I've always had good luck out of Tusk brand tubes.
What's up?
Yeah.
Tyler Vincent, this is yours. You left it in my bike, and glad you're home from the hospital, by the way.
Yeah. Glad to hear that. They're cheap compared to everything else. Pretty simple as far as installation goes.
For some people.
Well, there is a learning curve.
Yeah.
And if I give one piece of advice, it's just buy a good set of tire irons. Don't try to do it with the weird junky ones off Amazon. Rocky Mountain ATVMC has like a $25 set. It's 2 wide spoons and then like one that you'd use for a moose that has the curved head.
Yeah.
Super useful.
Yeah.
Great for me. One of the biggest things for running traditional tubes, they're DOT approved.
Yeah.
If you're one of the guys that's concerned about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And finally, this is really big for anybody that's taking a trip or going anywhere. Any power sports store in the country is going to have 18 and 21-inch tubes.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point because the more exotic and the more advanced you get with your technology, sometimes it's impossible to find that type of stuff, especially if you're running. We'll go through here in a little bit, but like a tubeless setup or a bib moose or what have you. Yeah, that is a huge thing to consider. Is if you're out riding along and you do have a flat, we hope you carry a spare. And I think that's another point to make, that it's easy to carry.
Yes.
A spare tube as compared to something else.
Yep. Spare is a patch kit.
Yeah.
I do recommend carrying a patch kit too as a last resort. So if you change your tube in the morning and you pick up another roofing nail or something, you're not completely SOL. But my first reaction wouldn't be immediately to try to patch one. I'd throw a fresh tube in it and go.
Yeah.
But I meant to bring them with me. I've got some short tire irons from Motion Pro that work pretty good. You really don't have to carry very much with you. If you're really, really smart, carry a little hand sanitizer to lubricate the bead or something like that. Yeah. And if you're planning on patching or changing out your own tubes on the trail, which everybody should be proficient at, I would suggest doing it once on the front and once on the rear with just what you carry on your bike, so you can get a feel and an appreciation for how good you have it with longer levers. Because when you start using those little short levers, it can get a lot more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's harder.
Yeah, we talked about that too in our tool review video a while back. Is familiarize yourself with the stuff that you can carry on the bike, because you get used to using your nice tools in the garage to change a tube, and then you have to use those short ones. It's a little bit of a learning curve.
Yep.
A little easier to pinch, and you obviously don't have as much leverage trying to put the tire back onto the rim like that.
You pretty much never get a flat in optimal conditions. It'll be like in one of the worst, roughest sections, you're out of breath, you're exhausted, it's hot, there's bugs flying around your ears. You got 10 guys standing around you trying to tell you how to do it.
Come on, hurry up, we gotta go.
Etc.
Yeah.
And that's a good segue into the downsides. Is it's the single most prone option for pinch flats and punctures.
Yeah.
Which, depending on what pressures you ride, your riding style, how aggressive you are, etc., that might might really not be much of an issue.
Yeah.
I typically don't get many flats in a year.
Yeah.
You know, if I get one or two, that's kind of an anomaly.
That's about how my luck has been as well. And like we were saying earlier, it's crazy to think, obviously AJ runs heavy duty tubes all the time. Seems to always get a flat every time he goes riding.
Yep.
I know, Nick Hall with his 500 and his KLR with us. He's got like lightweight tubes, heavy, not even
Yep.
heavy duty, and I can't honestly remember a single time he had a flat tire with us
Yep.
out on the trail. So it just seems like it's really rider specific. It's really terrain specific. Like you said, certain pressures or the way that guys attack certain lines or certain sections, that has a lot to do with it too. Something else that I would add, if you do get a flat on a tube, don't just throw the tube in there and think you're good to go.
No.
You reach inside and see, and do a little bit of investigating to find out
Yep.
why that thing went flat. Was it a pinch? Did something puncture the tire?
Yep.
Do you have a spoke nipple that's loosening up?
Yep.
That's another thing too. Make sure your rim strap's in good shape, because a rubber tube is not going to survive sitting there scraping on a really sharp
You
spoke
mean
head.
those 4 layers of duct tape
Yeah,
I put around
yeah,
my wheel because
yeah.
I never have rim strips when
Yeah,
I need them?
that or electrical tape,
Yep.
what have you. Yeah,
That's a really good suggestion. I have personally witnessed, you know, you're in a hurry, you want to get back on the trail, you get it off, start throwing the new tube in there, stuffing it in. I won't name names, but I tell them, like, wait, we need to figure out why this went flat. So, take a little bit of time to feel around in there or inflate your old tube and see where the puncture is. And
yeah, that's a really good point, especially if you have like a little air pump or something that's easy to inflate it. Yeah, you can kind of do that, figure out where the bad spot is, and just I always like to set it back over the rim, and then you can kind of see, all right, well, this is the spot that I need to focus on and see what was going on with it.
exactly.
Yep.
And
And don't try putting 2 cans of Fix a Flat in your tube when it's bad.
no,
That doesn't help.
I don't run any sealant, anything.
Yeah, something else too. Don't be like I was down at the Rocky Run ATV trail,
Yeah.
where you throw a spare tube in your bag and it just sets in your bag for 2 or 3 years because you didn't, you don't get a whole lot of flats. You don't have to have it. Guess what happens in 2 or 3 years? That thing can dry rot. That was a problem.
Let me tell you a little similar story. Me and Fred were over at Tom's house. We were changing out, I think, the front and rears on his DR, and he thought he had a 21-inch tube new, but he didn't. He said, "We'll just take the one out of the fender bag," and I unzipped that thing, undid it, and then stuck my finger through one side and out the other. I held that thing up. You could see daylight through it. Luckily, I had a 21-inch tube on my bike that I gave him. But, another thing too for traditional tubes, you can run a 21-inch tube, front or rear.
Yeah, in a pickle.
Yeah, I wouldn't go hammering on it if I was running a 21 out back, but I'd only carry a 21-inch tube.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It kind of frees up some space, and it'll get you off the trail and get you back to the truck or maybe to a parts store or something that's going to have an actual 18-inch tube. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand too with we were talking about in previous episodes about riding with groups of people.
Yes.
And making sure, this guy's going to carry this guy's going to carry that, and you can kind of spread the load out a little bit. So I know when me and Justin and Tyler went riding, Justin was asking me, he's like, do you have a 21-inch tube you're going to carry? I said, no, I don't have a 21. He's like, I got one. I'll throw a 21-inch in my bike. And then Tyler had that 18-inch. So we were kind of covered front or rear. So that's always a nice thing to do, is be able to share the load a little bit out there.
I agree. Kind of a weird school of thought. Everyone should carry their own tools to do whatever they need to on their bike. I don't like to rely on, it's easy to forget stuff. But as far as tubes and stuff like that go, spread the load out. Not everybody needs to have one. If you're doing a big group ride, the chances of all 10 of you getting flats on a given day are pretty
low,
pretty slim, but not zero.
Yeah, unless you run over part of the trail where somebody was trying to build a deck on their camp and got decking screws all
Yeah,
over the trail or something.
they'll do that. One of the other disadvantages for tubes is they are consumable.
Yeah.
They do have a lifespan. I'll run a couple tires on a tube if it's nice. I also powder my tubes to try to cut down on any chafing or friction, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'll just inspect it. And if I have any questions, I'll just throw another
Yeah,
one in there. They're so cheap that
Yeah.
you might as well. Don't be the guy, if you can help it, don't be the guy that gets a flat on the trail and your buddies help you change it out and you pull that old tube out of there and it's got like 20 patches on it.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah,
don't be that guy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty easy to tell too. Like when you do a tire change, if you can see you've got some wear spots on that tube, or there's a lot of rubber material inside the tire. Just go ahead and throw a new.
Or if you notice that your spoke nipples wore through your rim strip,
just take care of it.
get rid of the rim strip, the tube, start new, because it's not worth losing out on rotting.
Yep, for sure. Anything else on regular tubes or heavy duty tubes?
No, I think that is pretty decent.
Okay. And don't be afraid to comment. Let us know what your stories are, what your guys' setups are. We'd love to go through that as well as we do the show.
Absolutely.
So, this next option is something that came on the market, I'd say about 10 years ago or so. Been around for a little while now.
We're on Gen 2.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, Gen 2. So that is the tubeless system. So this thing is it's pretty ingenious and cool, but it also has drawbacks just like everything else as well.
Yep.
So the way that this thing works is you have a high pressure inner bladder, correct?
Yes, the red
part.
it's like 100 psi inner bladder, and that's what actually seals.
Yeah, the tire to the rim.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that high pressure inner tube seals against the insides of the bead, and that's what actually holds the air pressure for the air chamber, which is the void between that and the tire carcass.
Right, and it actually lets you run some pretty low psi and keep the tire on the rim and keep it from debeading.
And I've heard a lot of guys say that high pressure inner bladder really helps to keep your rim from getting knocked, like on rocks and whatnot.
Yeah. So it's something it's new technology, something that's cool. As you have here on there, it greatly reduces the chance of having a pinch flat.
Yep.
The flats can be repaired without dismounting the tire from the rim because in a sense, it turns it into a tubeless setup.
Yeah,
you
just
can plug
a standard tire.
Yeah, you can plug a tire. You plug the tire. Get you back on the trail. As we said, it allows for very low tire pressures, which it's crazy to if you want to make one change to a bike. If you're having issues with traction, tire pressure can be an absolute game changer. You're having a lot more contact area on the ground. So this gives you that freedom to play with that a little bit more than it would like a normal tube. It's the best option for converting dirt wheels to a tubeless pneumatic setup. I mean, it's the easiest way to do it.
Easiest, cleanest. It's reversible.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. I've seen some guys take like 3M construction adhesive and stuff, and you slather that over your area where spoke nipples and everything are. Well, that's no longer serviceable. So if you break a spoke or something happens,
you got to take all that back out.
Well, if you can, good luck. I'd buy a second set of wheels and save myself the trouble.
Yeah.
But it really is, in my opinion, the best option if you want to go to a tubeless pneumatic setup.
Yeah.
It is pretty much the best out there.
Yep.
Tire changes are pretty easy.
Yeah.
After that initial setup and everything.
Yeah, it can actually stay on the rim. You don't have to take it off every single time that you're doing a tire change.
Yep, exactly. And they last a long time. Chris Toth has like 20,000 miles or something on his Honda.
Yeah.
And that's on the lower end. There's some guys that have some serious mileage on these setups.
Yeah, I know. I know some people run them when they're off-road racing, but it does seem like this is used a lot more by dual sport guys.
Yes,
for sure, or strictly trail enduro guys.
Yep.
but yeah, it's good for everything. Good for racing. Good for
Yep.
street trail use.
Yep. One of the other positives is it's an integrated rim lock. You don't
Yeah.
have to worry.
Right.
You don't have to worry about spinning, you know, your rim on a tube or anything. That's another drawback for running traditional tubes.
Yeah.
Is you have to run rim locks.
Yeah, we should probably kind of take a little step back and talk
Yes.
about that as well.
You
If
have to run rim locks.
yeah, if your bike doesn't come with rim locks, drill the thing, put a rim lock in it.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
for the kind of riding we do, it's just cheap insurance. Don't let your valve core in your tube be your rim lock.
Yeah.
It's going to rip off.
I've seen guys say, "Oh, I run 25 psi. I'll never spin it." I spun the stem on my Kawasaki, and that thing makes like maybe 20 horsepower, and that was at like 25 psi.
Yeah.
It will happen.
Yep. Yeah.
If you have enough traction and you get on it, especially if you're a guy that likes to use the clutch and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of guys run double rim locks 180 degrees out on opposite sides of the rim to balance it out.
Yeah.
I just use balance weights, but I've had a lot of really good luck out of Motion Pro light locks, which is a composite rim lock that's I think the lightest on the market. But the cast aluminum ones that are cheap really aren't that much heavier typically. So
yep.
Anything's better than nothing.
And that's another point of emphasis too when we were talking about like maintaining things. Look at your rim locks when you got the thing off there. They can come apart.
Yep.
They can start to disintegrate, and I think what $8-10 for one. It's if that. It's,
even the Motion Pro light locks are like $15 or something like that. I will say follow the instructions to the T.
Yeah.
Of what they tell you to do, because there's nothing worse than having your tire all buttoned up. You're tightening that rim lock down. You hear click. That was the sound of the head of that stud pulling through that composite rim lock.
Yep. Try again.
Yeah. In my defense, I was very much used to cast aluminum rim locks that really just, just get them tight. But anyway, tubeless setup, you don't have to worry about that because it's integrated into the system.
Yeah, that is a nice thing.
Yep. So on to some disadvantages.
There are some
that should seriously be considered depending on what kind of riding you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
The biggest one that jumps out for me is the high pressure inner bladder is not field repairable. It is not patchable. It cannot be if you pick up a 4-inch deck screw that goes through the tire and then punctures that inner bladder, which they do have like a Kevlar saddle over it cover to try to minimize that, but it can't happen. You've witnessed it happen.
Yeah. Real quick, me and Fred went down to the Shenandoah 500 there in 2019, and you come along into this kind of big open clearing there in the forest road trails, right at the entrance to the Rocky Run ATV trail, which I really hope opens back up sometime soon because that is a awesome trail to run.
Fingers crossed.
So we're sitting there, and there's a bunch of guys. It was kind of a good point to stop and rest. And me and Fred are sitting there, and and that's when we were following that Lee guy on the V-Strom. Should have been out there. But we're going along, and we see a guy. He's got a bike up on a stump with the front wheel off, and we're like, okay, changing it too. But we get over there, and this dude had the tubeless set up, and he had run over. This thing looked like a railroad spike, and it had punctured that inner bladder. And man, just sitting there trying to basically field strip that thing down and get it apart and get everything out of it, and then essentially having to put a tube back in the front. I mean, it was an ordeal. It was something that you don't want to do on the side of the trail with minimal tools.
What does a guy running tubeless have in common with a guy that runs heavy duty tubes?
You still got to carry a tube.
You still got to carry a tube if you want to make it home.
Yeah,
that's always been the biggest caveat for me. Is does it happen every time? No. Can it happen? Yes. Another thing too is we talked about in the advantages, it greatly reduces the chance of pinch flats on a tube. Right? You can still get pinch flats on tubeless, and a lot of people don't realize this, except now you've got a pinch flat on the sidewall of your tire. It is actually compressed the rim against a rock or something, and put the classic snake bite style pinch on that tire carcass. I would not even attempt to patch a sidewall on a bike. I
Right.
know Gabe from Torture Test Magazine and his tubeless review, that was one of his biggest drawbacks is you can still get pinch flats if you run a low enough pressure,
Yeah.
except they're now non-repairable.
Yeah. Or, going through like a rocky section and getting a really bad cut in your tire,
Yep.
it's going to start leaking. And if you have the tube, maybe it doesn't go all the way through the tire
Yep.
into that tube, but it's still going to stay inflated up. Well, if it's, into a really meaty part of the tire and converting it over to that tubeless setup, it could
Yep.
leak.
I agree. It's kind of expensive.
Yeah. That's the
I
next
guess compared to tubes, they're expensive, but I guess for the technology and what you're actually getting, $100 for a rim seems fair.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would
I'll
agree
say
with that.
It's more than I would care to spend, but then it's also my riding style isn't. I don't think it's the best suited for a setup like that.
Yeah.
But
I think it'd be interesting to try though, and
yeah,
see how it works out.
as soon as I hit the lottery, I'll try that out.
Yeah.
But it's also not DOT approved. That's if
Yeah,
you're one of the guys that sweat stuff like that.
yeah. And it might come back on you and get you someday. But man, it just seems like that in itself could be a whole episode about how much of a fine line that is on
Well,
everything. You know?
I understand why it's not DOT approved.
Yeah.
I understand why they haven't sought to have it approved because to do that is to hold yourself liable for
Yeah.
whatever could potentially
Right.
happen. Same way you order tires from Motorsport, Rocky, anybody, you get this little paper in the tire that says only to be installed by a trained professional and blah blah blah, and user assumes all liability.
Yeah.
So it's a very good CYA for them to just state on the listing, not DOT approved.
Yeah.
Like use it at your own risk.
Yeah.
Is it inherently unsafe? No more so than tires on your car,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
As long as you keep that inner bladder inflated. That's another thing too, is you have to have a high pressure pump
Yeah.
to the inner bladder because
Yeah, it's
a
not-
standard pump can't hit.
Yeah.
Well, a standard like bicycle style pump,
Yeah.
like that's what I carry, is just a hand pump, can't hit 100 psi.
Yeah. You're not going to be inflating that up on the side of the trail to 100 psi.
No.
Not easily.
Which
anyway.
I mean, another thing that would suck too. Now that I think about it, is do a standard tube change. You just have to air up the tube, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to air that inner bladder back up to seat your bead.
Yeah.
And then you have to air up the void for the actual tire. So you got to do it twice over.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I haven't done it personally though, so it might not even be a problem at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Anything else on the tubeless system?
no, I'd like to try. Honestly, I'd like to try
Yeah,
it,
I would too. It's something that's out there that I haven't had really that much experience with, other than seeing the guy puncture the inner bladder and cuss it the whole time he was changing it out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand that.
Yep. So let's go to the next option, which is something I'm currently running in the front of my bike, and that is the Venerable Bib Moose. This is essentially a foam molded insert that goes inside your tire.
Big donut.
Just big, huge. Well, I guess you could consider it a pool noodle, right?
Yeah, that's fair. A continuous pool noodle.
So, I have one in the front of my bike, and it was one of those deals where I had it in the garage and actually had it for my race bike, and I needed to change my front tire out. So I changed the front tire, and what do I find? I find a tube that's looking pretty sketchy. And I was like, you know what? I've got this Bib Moose laying around here. I have never used it. It's just going to probably continue to set in my garage. I'm going to throw it in the front of this bike and see how it works. And, so far, so good. I believe it's the higher PSI.
Yeah.
So that's
Which,
another thing on these.
That only gets you up to like what, 15?
15, yeah.
So
yeah.
For most, like, I normally just keep my tires aired up to like 18, 20, somewhere in there. And it's been good for almost everything I've done. If it's really muddy, I'll lower the back down to like 12 or something if I really need the traction. But that is one of the big caveats with a Moose is whatever stiffness you install, you're there.
Yeah.
There's
no adjustment.
There is no adjustment short of removing it and putting in a different stiffness.
Yeah, I actually have seen guys take them out and drill holes in them and take
Yep.
some of the material
Yeah.
out to change that
Yeah.
psi.
I've also seen most guys that run a moose, they're a moose guy.
Yeah.
Like that's all they want to
Yep.
run. So you end up with several of these used mooses. You can cut a wedge and, you know, split a new moose, stuff that wedge in there, and make it effectively stiffer.
Yeah.
But then once you spoon that bead over, that's that. There's no more changes to be made.
Yeah.
But man, it is the most durable option
Yep.
in existence.
Yep.
You know, all the hard enduro guys, well, not all, almost all the hard enduro guys run it. It is the go-to for the Dakar Rally. It is the most durable, bomb-proof option. Um, the most simple setup you can. It's literally just a.
Yeah. There's no maintenance
It's just
to
a
it.
foam donut. I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't.
With
It
a
doesn't get any simpler.
yeah, with a rim lock built into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
You know, you could run over a 5-pound box of nails. You won't even notice.
yeah, it doesn't make any difference.
It is the absolute most durable and brutally simple setup available. No need for tire tools. No need for any spares. No pump.
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, it's an attractive option, but there are some disadvantages.
Just like everything else.
Yes.
You know, and I think the top option and the disadvantages column that you have on here is probably the number one thing, especially if you're using it on a dual sport bike where it's
Yep.
going to see a lot of street use and stuff. These things have a very odd feel.
Yep.
I noticed on the front of mine, it almost feels like you got a flat front tire.
Yeah.
It
kind
tips,
of wallows and
yeah, it's now you get used to it, you really do.
Yeah.
But if you let somebody that's not used to it on the bike, they're going to be immediately like, "This is awful. I would
Yep.
never run this on there."
Yep.
It does take some getting used to. It lets the tire kind of roll and flex a little bit more in your turns, and you don't really have that nice like planted like
Yep.
point, like a tipping point basically. It just feels like it kind of wallows and then starts to turn, like
It's
almost like a flat tire.
It's like having a tire full of mashed potatoes.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It's odd.
It is
Yeah.
very odd. Yeah, and does require periodic maintenance and
Yes.
lubrication. That is
Yes.
the number one killer of a bib moose is
Yep.
lack of lubrication.
Yep. Friction generates heat. Heat kills your moose. It's that simple.
Yeah.
So, they're widely regarded as not being fit for use on the road. Lack of DOT approval notwithstanding.
Yeah.
But some guys make it work, you know. But there's a lot of people that have had issues with the moose essentially just degrading as your day goes on, and
Yeah, I would say, you know, when I did mine, I bought like I think it was 4 jars of KY jelly or something or Vaseline.
yeah.
And which was interesting in itself going to the checkout counter at Walmart with that much Vaseline.
Well, they say, oh wow, James, one more than usual this week.
The lady literally looked at me up and down. She said, "You partying tonight?" I said, "I'm having a tire changing party." But
Should have bought a couple cucumbers or
Oh,
something
that was
to throw off the.
yeah. Well, you know, just throw even more suspicion on. Yeah, I'll do that next time.
We're making salads.
But yeah, yeah, you got to have that thing lubed up. Now, in my experience, let's see, Brian Holmes came and rode
Yes.
with us. Was
Yes.
it last year around my birthday?
Yeah. Your
and
birthday beat down.
yeah, I think he had bibs front and rear on that 701 Husky,
Yep.
and I think he said that the one that he had in the back was the lower PSI one, but it actually started to come apart on him when he was out riding with
By
us.
the end of the day, it was absolutely the lower PSI
Yeah,
option
for
so,
sure. And I would say that being in the back it's going to generate more heat being in the rear.
I would
you know.
imagine so, especially on a higher horsepower.
Oh yeah, like that
machine
thing
or-
was. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're not maintenance free. Some people think they are, but they're not. You know, they're expensive.
Yeah.
As an option, you know, 130, 140 bucks for you know, one end or the other.
Yep.
250 or more for a full set. So it would be in your best interest if you're not rich to, you know, maintain them periodically.
Yeah.
So another thing too is you know, stuff needs to be pretty clean when you're working with mooses and stuff. and hose your rim down and everything if you're planning on reusing that moose, because you don't want it covered in dirt and everything else. One big drawback for a moose is it has to be properly sized to a specific tire.
Yep.
So typically, the way the companies like Michelin, for instance, if you're going to run a Starcross tire or whatever, they have a moose that they designed at the factory to fit that profile of tire.
Yeah.
But if you're going to run like a Michelin moose with a Tusk tire or something like that, you're kind of taking a risk. There's going to be some dead space in there, and that's going to take like a 12 psi feel and make it feel like an 8 or a 5 psi feel. You're going to get a lot of roll, in your tires. You're going around turns, and
That's a good point, because I'm pretty sure I have a Michelin bib and a Tusk front tire right now. So that's probably why my tire feels the way it does.
Probably does contribute.
Yep. And obviously, if we had a difficulty scale of installation, the bib is the absolute hardest one to put in a tire.
5 out of 5 middle fingers, you think?
Dude.
So I've not personally installed a moose. I've seen enough like video and stuff. I'm like, man, I'd have to really want it. It almost takes specialized equipment.
Oh,
you almost have to have like a Rapconda style setup, or a really sturdy tire stand, and like 15 of the curved tire irons, and eight arms. And
I've seen both ends of that spectrum. So when I put the front bib in my bike, it actually come out of Mikey Miller's race bike. He ran like three races on the front, so it wasn't like wore out, but it was seasoned. Sure. We'll say seasoned.
Supple.
Well, that Tusk front tire is very pliable too. It's on that. So, when I had it out at mom and dad's house, and dad was sitting there like laughing at me the whole time. He's like, "Oh, you're gonna hate this. This is gonna be awful trying to put this in."
It sounds like your dad.
It went in like easier than a tube. Like, I'm like, "Oh, this is fantastic."
Yeah.
On the flip side, 2 weeks later, Fred Miller is putting new tires on the back of his 500.
Yep.
And I called him about something else, and I said, "Hey man, what's going on?" And I could hear him like sweating through the phone. He's like, "I'm trying to get this tire mounted up on this new bib." I was like, "Well, I can come over and give you a hand." So I went over there. Now Fred's got 2 rim locks in the back of his 18-inch rear with that bib moose that was new. I mean, lubed, everything. He has a really nice, sturdy tire changing stand. I brought my 3 spoons over. He had like 8 in there, and it was all me and him both could do to get that thing in. And one of the big problems was we finally did get the thing mounted on there, and it actually had rolled the rim lock a little bit, so the threads were like on an angle.
Yeah.
We ended up having to take like a C clamp and clamp that thing back and get it straight again, and then tighten the. I mean, it was a disaster. It was a nightmare. I was like, I lost 5 pounds just sitting there trying to help him in the short time that I did. It was awful, dude. Absolutely awful.
That's why, in my opinion, like for what I do, I would run a set of mooses and a second set of wheels.
Yeah.
Dirt, like hardcore, hard loop style terrain, hair scramble type terrain. I would consider running a moose, but I really don't get enough flats to warrant it just yet. But I've never heard anybody say, "Wow, that moose install was really easy."
Yeah.
So it's something else that makes it a little bit more difficult too. Is you got that freaking lubricant all over. It's on your hands. It's on your levers. It's on the bead. I mean,
yeah, it's party time.
Yeah, it definitely makes stuff a little bit more difficult. So, I talked about people taking and wedge a moose. Stuff a wedge in there or whatever. So there's a couple companies that have expanded on that and created a modular moose or moose balls, or I think Mr. Wolf is one of the companies
that's what this picture is right here.
So
is Mr. Wolf. Yeah.
That gets rid of, well, not gets rid of. That makes it easier for you to tune the stiffness of a moose. If you want a little bit lower PSI simulated, pull a segment out. If you want a little bit stiffer simulated pressure, stuff another one in there.
Yeah.
If you have a worn or a damaged section, like you pick up a railroad spike, experience as that guy. You don't have to replace your whole moose. You can replace just a segment.
That's good.
And same advantages as the moose. Otherwise, no tire tools, pretty bomb proof, straightforward. Unfortunately, not maintenance free. It's actually probably a little bit more maintenance intensive.
Yeah.
Lubrication is even more important because you've now introduced a point of friction between every single segment on that. Friction generates heat, and heat kills your moose. So, I don't have any personal experience with it. Seems like some guys out west are really picking up on them and liking them and everything. But
yeah, I think that would work very well out west, where those guys are bombing through the desert or on those mountain passes where there's a lot of old like mining activity and stuff, and there's just nails and screws everywhere.
Activity, sharp rocks, and something a lot of people don't consider is cactus spikes.
Yeah,
you get like a 4-inch long cactus spike out in the desert. I'd be running mooses too, all the time.
Yeah, so, they're definitely terrain dependent as well.
Same caveats, or maybe more so than a regular moose, is that they're expensive.
Yeah.
I did not look up the price, but I recall seeing somewhere that the moose balls were, not a cheap option.
No, they're a little bit more than a dedicated full size moose. Yep.
So,
well, I think that brings us to the latest and greatest.
The weirdest option. On this list.
This thing is insane. Yeah. I mean, this is a simple way to put it, and that is the Gabagool Lucioli. This thing is a 7 millimeter thick tube.
Yeah.
I have literally watched videos of guys taking an axe at this thing, fully inflated, as hard as they can swing, and it bounces off of it.
Yep.
There's videos of dudes riding rock gardens with just the tube, no tire on this thing. 2 integrated rim locks. It is the thickest, baddest thing on the market.
So for you guys that can only visualize standard measurements, that's 0.276 inches, almost 0.3-inch thick. I guess sidewall. I don't know. Almost a 0.3-inch thick walled tube.
Yeah.
It might as well be a supermoto tire.
That's a good comparison.
Two integrated rim locks. You can run insanely low pressures, same way you can with the tubeless. Will be more difficult to puncture than a standard tube.
Yeah.
Virtually eliminates pinch flats. Extremely durable. It will likely last the life of a bike, barring any like deck screws or anything going through it. Like,
I think even that might not even go through one of these.
It might not carry. Can you imagine running one of those just with a can of slime in it?
Yeah. 40 pounds on the back of your tire.
That is one of the big disadvantages. Weighs 8 pounds.
Yeah, that's insane.
So
that's heavy.
I don't have personal experience with it, but I did at one point run a desert tire on the back of one of my bikes. It had a way thicker sidewall, way bigger lugs. It was significantly heavier, and I felt like I lost 30% of my horsepower. I mean, in somebody's defense, it was on a smaller displacement bike, but man, it was very noticeable. Something else that was noticeable too is that unsprung weight.
Yeah.
Yep. Especially going over rocks and stuff, it seemed like it had a lot more tendency to skitter, and the back end felt like it had a lot more of a say in how the bike was handling and how everything was going along. 8 pounds. That's pretty serious.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot of rotating mass too. For those of you that paid attention to engineering class, the further out from the center, the rotating axis, you put weight, the worse it is in terms of handling and all that. The more noticeable it will be, the more power it will take to get it moving.
Yep. May make your 500 feel like a 125 by the time it's said that.
But there's also the flywheel effect. So once you get that thing spun up, it's not going to want to stop, which is it's great when it's good, and it's terrifying when
Might be
it's
harder.
not.
It can be harder to stop.
Right? Yeah.
Probably more wear on your brake pads and everything else.
Yep. So, um,
And it's outrageously expensive.
yes. So to set it up for the front and rear, they're currently running a deal for a 21-inch front and 18-inch rear. It's $336 plus taxes,
I'm coming,
shipping,
Elizabeth.
et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of money, man. That's a lot of traditional tubes. Who
Yeah.
you know outside of Arthur Punsack? Who do you know that's getting that many flats to warrant something like that?
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. I think
Yeah.
it's an attractive option for some. I could see that thing being an absolute bear and monster to install, just like it would be a regular bib too.
I bet it would. It
Yeah.
would be quite difficult because just trying to stuff like a 3 to 4 millimeter tube into like a
Yeah.
21-inch front where you don't have much space is difficult on its
I-
own.
Yeah, I don't see you being able to, break one side of a tire down and pull a tube out and then just throw this in there. I think you're
No.
going to have to install it just like you do a bib. It's going
You
to have to
might
be
you might even
stuffed in a
have
tire.
to get weird with it and have that Lucioli thing like partially in your tire and then set the
It-
wheel on
Yeah, I
it
think.
and then lever it
Yeah, I
on.
think
and-
it kind of like you do a bib.
I
Yeah,
don't know. You won't be carrying a spare unless you're going to wear it like a bandolier, you know.
maybe you got a sidecar you can stuff it down.
Maybe, maybe. Not DOT approved, but
Yeah.
most of the options on this list haven't been.
Yep.
It's new to the market, so stuff that's new, people always want to try. Just because you see guys trying it doesn't mean it's good. I don't know if it's good. It seems like an interesting option, but compared to what else is on the market, is it a problem?
Is it solving an issue?
Is it actually solving anything that
Yeah.
hasn't already been solved by something else? Or is it a product looking for a problem to solve?
Yeah.
Like if pure durability is your main concern, run a Moose.
Yeah.
If the ability to change your tire pressure depending on terrain is your main concern, run tubeless or traditional tubes. I don't know one way or the other. I would love to talk to somebody that has ran one for any period of time, especially for like dual sport use.
Yeah.
Really, that amount of rotating mass just really seems like it's going to be a big damper on stuff.
Yeah, I think that it's so new and it's so expensive right now that you're not really going to see a whole lot of stuff out there about it being used in our area of riding. But I really, at the end of the day, I don't really think there's a right or wrong answer to this.
No.
There's so many different options out there, and everybody's going to stand by and die on the hill of what they like and what they always run.
Yep.
It's like the unicorn motorcycle. It doesn't exist.
Doesn't
If it did,
exist.
everybody would buy it.
Yep.
Same thing with this setup.
There's always downsides to anything.
Yep.
You have to figure out, do the upsides outweigh the downsides? As I was compiling this list, for me at least, traditional tubes, heavy duty tubes like 3 millimeter plus tubes are the way to go.
Yep.
Or it's just so easily serviceable on the trail. I don't have to deal with the difficult install like with a Moose. It's just affordable. It's tried and true. It's been the go-to for decades and decades.
There are two other little points I'd like to bring up. If you are running normal tubes and you find yourself getting a lot of pinch flats or a lot of flats in general, one thing that you can do is take your old tube, cut the inside diameter of it out, and wrap it around your new tube. I used to do that racing years ago before everybody was running foam inserts and everything.
Yeah, they have,
no issues with that.
I saw they have like a foam insert for tubeless now.
Oh yeah.
To, I guess, have protection that inner bladder or whatever and reduce the chance of a pinch flat on the tire carcass.
Yeah.
But they make tube saddles and all this other stuff, and the options are out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of homebrew stuff. I know we were talking to Tom King on the way up to Tom McKee and Debbie's little bike show, which thanks again for inviting us up there. That was awesome.
That was great.
He was talking about he used to run two tubes in a rim.
Yep.
So when one would go flat, he'd just air the other one up.
That was it's like, boy, you thought this was a rim lock? I don't know. I'd never thought of that in my life, but as soon as he said it, I was like, huh, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
So
might be onto something there.
I don't know that I'm going to adopt it, but
Yeah,
it was cool.
yeah.
You know, if nothing
Why
else.
does your rim lock have a Schrader valve in it? But what are you doing there?
Hey, I watched he who will not be named attempt to air up a tire via the rim lock at one point.
How long you been pumping on that thing? 20 minutes. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. The response once I pointed out, the response I got was, "Well, I was wondering why the valve cap was missing."
I feel
So
bad for him.
he's a good guy.
Yeah,
We love him.
We'll leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
The last thing too that I kind of like, and you're seeing a lot on these middleweight adventure bikes, especially,
Yep.
is the new style rims where the spoke head is actually outside of the tire, which effectively makes a spoked wheel tubeless. And I think that there is a lot of practicality, and
Yep.
that's a really awesome setup. And it probably works well for those heavier bikes like that.
I think for the adventure side of things,
Yeah, that's awesome.
it's probably the best option that's hit the market.
Yeah,
Um, you can put a bullet or a rope plug in it, just like a tubeless. It's probably the most maintenance-free option
yeah.
available.
You don't have a cast wheel that can crack or bend
We
easily.
don't even talk about cast wheels. There's a reason the KTM 390 Duke hasn't made it, or did they?
They have an option for spoke
They
wheels
did
now.
start putting spoke
Yeah.
wheels on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, it's a lot more cheese, but
Oh, it's KTM. The
keep the money.
the company that for their 2024 models forgot how to design a gas tank. So your pickup is
Yeah.
like really, really
Yeah, tell them about this.
as an engineer, this really boils my blood. I'm gonna go in on this, right?
Go ahead. We got
So
time.
everybody wants an oversized tank to do miles, right? I threw one on my 350. It was like probably $400 or something like that, which is way more than I ever wanted to spend. But what else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So on the newer, it was initially the off-road only bikes, but now on the newer EXC models, they have switched to a fuel pickup and integrated pump in the gas tank that where the pickup is probably halfway up on the tank. And the concept was, you're riding this thing on the trail, fuel's always splashing and sloshing in there, and it's always being able to splash up into that little reservoir and pick fuel up and go. Well, if you're one of the guys that uses an EXC like most people, there's periods where you're just going to be on the road for a while. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of sloshing going on. So now, thanks to KTM's genius engineering, you can run a bike drive fuel with a half tank. I mean, look it up. Takamoto recently released a fix for it, which
Well, at least it keeps those guys in business around.
it's
Yeah.
it's pretty costly for what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. It's absolutely disgusting that the industry is trending in a direction where to run an oversized tank, what used to already be a huge amount of money to put down for one single mod, you've now added $300 on top of that, you know? And then everyone's going to sit and, well, I don't understand why these kids are wanting these electric bikes. It's like, well, if I can get more range out of one from the factory without having to spend $800 for more fuel range, it is more attractive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was
that's
cracking up when you sent that to me. I was like, what the hell?
it's just so ridiculous. It's like you had something that worked. I mean, I kind of understand why they went for it because the on a KTM having that fuel outlet so low,
Yeah, it can catch
it
stuff.
is a concern. What I would have done personally was just mold a section of the tank down lower that would catch debris or a rock or whatever and deflect it off instead of
Yeah.
making a fuel tank that can run dry when it's half full. So that's
Sounds like a somebody in a boardroom in the marketing
Yeah,
department was like,
that's
let's do this.
somebody that's never been on a bike was like, yeah, this is the greatest idea ever.
All right. Well, we hope that you guys learned a little bit or got a little bit more insight on different options for you out there. And we got some comments that we'll go through now. Thank you guys so much for interacting with us tonight on that. I'm going to say, again, I apologize not being able to see. 5 minutes in and I'm already getting called out. I'm going to say it's got to be either AJ or Marcus. One of the two.
One of the two.
Next one. Duct tape rim works. Yep, that's kind of the standard go-to when the rim strap decides to let go.
Yep.
Let's see here. Regular tubes, dual rim locks per wheel, tough tires with stiff sidewalls. I decided it was the best combo for dual sport riding after many hours of research. Ride flat out capability helps with deadly situations like trees getting caught in the fork or swing arm at high speed, and no issues with balancing or heat protection from highway use. That's a great point.
Yep.
Whatever can get you out sometimes is definitely the best option.
Whatever gets you to Richwood.
I'll put that on a sticker soon. Next one up, double motion pro rim locks on both off-road wheels.
Yep. I
Yep.
love light locks.
With the Nitro Moose bibs. Nitro Moose is a good brand to use on that. And lastly, we use tube saddles with the Moose heavy duty tubes. Yep. It's a great option. All right. Appreciate that, guys.
Well, by and large, in the group, I've observed most people just rock tubes.
Yep.
I've
so.
not met a lot of people that run tubeless. Those that do run tubeless had a lot of good stuff to say about it. For like the hard loop and stuff like that, there's a significant number of people that run a second set of wheels with mooses and hardcore dedicated dirt tires.
Yeah, that in itself, I think, is a great option, great setup. Is
Yeah.
having something that you can switch to, especially if you have a bike that you're kind of trying to do everything on.
Yep.
You're like, all right, we're going to do a lot more pavement and gravel. Let's put the gravel set on, with
Yep.
some 50/50 tires or something. So, yeah, it's definitely a good option to do as well. Let's go through our industry news this evening. First up, the Dakar Rally has axed the quad class. Now, this is something that you're seeing a lot in not only the Dakar Rally, but a lot of different motorsports in general. Just because, I mean, let's be frank, the four wheeler is dying.
Yes.
It's went the way of the dodo
Yep.
board.
And the guys that didn't eventually jump ship to ride on two wheels from quads, the ones that remained, I would say most of them jumped ship to run side by side.
Yep. That's just a natural progression of that, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they 30 years of doing the quad class. It is no more. Their main points were the lack of manufacturer support and just a lack of competitors. This past 2023 Dakar Rally, there was only 13 quads racing.
Who even still makes a race style quad?
Not very many, buddy.
No.
Not very many.
You go to a local hair scramble and watch the quad class, and it's all early 2000s Honda 400s and
450s.
They're clapped out, they're beat down, they're on their 10th owner. They're like, please just let me die. And somebody dusts them off, puts a Chinese rebuild kit on them, and you're off to the races.
Yeah. Next up was KTM Husqvarna are offering extended warranties on their LC8 equipped motorcycles. So
Interesting.
the 790, the 890, and the 1290 and 1390 V twins. And of course, there's always a caveat: the bike has to be serviced at the KTM dealer for any of the regular maintenance to keep that up.
That's always been one of my biggest pet peeves. I understand why they do it. Like, you can't trust that somebody's not going to lie about their service schedule. And I've seen some of the stuff on Facebook Marketplace, and I know you're lying when you're saying the maintenance you did to something, right?
Yeah.
But
I don't have a tuner on my Subaru. What are you talking about?
No, it's bone stock. It's just a downpipe. I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that have the money to get it serviced at the dealer or whatever. But man, if you followed the maintenance by the book and took it to a dealer, you would eclipse the price of that bike in like 10,000 miles. It would really add up.
Yep. Last but not least, CF Moto held their worldwide release of the Ibex 450, which we talked about on the last episode. Had select media personalities there to test ride the bikes. Did a good mix of everything: some road, some pretty hardcore single track trail. A lot of positive feedback on that thing. Said that the engine was very, very capable and very torquey for what it was. Great ergos, good suspension, and just overall a very well put together package. The number one complaint between everybody was that the front brakes were awful. They said it felt like you had wooden brake pads in there. So
I love it. You can't wash it out if you can't stop it, right?
hopefully they address that on the production models. But
So,
good to see some positive feedback
Yeah.
on the CF Moto 450. That's definitely going to be a venerable option in the middleweight segment.
yeah. I hate to say it, but in a way, props CF Moto for building the bike KTM refused to.
Yeah.
You know, they wouldn't give us the 490 Enduro R or whatever they prototyped
Yeah.
and abandoned.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, that's going to lead us into the last segment, and everybody's favorite, had to lay her down.
Did you run into some clippings? Did Barb take the kids? Well, Hoss, maybe you had to lay her down.
Knight's had to lay her down is a case of, we talked about how bad the front brakes were on the CF Moto.
Yeah.
Pretty good on a motocross bike.
Yeah.
So
maybe too good.
Maybe too good. So maybe some front brake clippings.
Oh! Oh!
That's always fun. I used to love watching the clips of the hard enduro guys coming in on the front wheel and trying to set the bike on a stand. Yeah, that's always.
I love seeing the outtakes.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us this evening. We thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we hope to catch you next week for episode 53 of Tallboys
and Trackmasters. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
We'll see you next time.